Good morning. Welcome to Business 360, where business, markets, and the economy come into full view. I'm Margaux Salcedo, and this is the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Infrastructure spending falls in May, its 11th straight month of year-on-year declines. Most Philippine exports are spared from new U.S. tariffs. And later in the show, Monetary Board member and former Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno joins us to discuss the state of the economy ahead of the President's State of the Nation address. Infrastructure spending fell 35% to 80.1 billion pesos in May, marking its 11th straight month of year-on-year declines. The Department of Budget and Management said stricter review, audit, and documentary requirements delayed payments for public works projects. From January to May, infrastructure spending dropped nearly 43% compared with the same period last year. Meanwhile, total government spending rose 3.8% in May due to higher operating costs, local government transfers, and interest payments. Looking ahead, the government expects spending to increase in the second half of the year as more funds are released. About 60% of Philippine exports to the United States will remain exempt from the new 12.5% U.S. tariff. The Department of Trade and Industry said only about 34% of Philippine exports, worth $6.25 billion, will be covered by the new levy. Key exports such as semiconductors, electronics, agricultural products, automotive parts, and aircraft parts will remain duty-free. The DTI said the Philippines is in a better position than many of its regional neighbors because fewer of its exports are affected. The government is continuing talks with the U.S. to seek better terms for Philippine exporters. The Philippine banking sector showed signs of improvement in June as non-performing loans fell to their lowest level in 6 months. Data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas shows the industry's gross non-performing loan ratio eased to 3.29%. Despite the improvement, banks set aside 541 billion pesos in loan loss provisions, building a larger financial buffer against potential risks. The BSP says the banking sector remains resilient as it continues to fight inflation while providing relief measures for affected borrowers. Globe Telecom is exploring new growth opportunities by partnering with Japan's KDDI Corporation. Through the partnership, Globe hopes to adapt KDDI's Japanese business model into the telco's network of over 67 million subscribers, bundling telecom services with finance, entertainment, and lifestyle offerings. Globe says its partnership with KDDI will help it learn from one of the world's most advanced telecommunications ecosystems. We're taking a quick break. We'll speak with former Finance Secretary and now Monetary Board member Benjamin Diokno when Business 360 returns. Welcome back to Business 360. I'm Margaux Salcedo. We now look at the state of the country's economy ahead of President Marcos' State of the Nation address. And with us today is Monetary Board member and former Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno, who joins us to share his insights on the country's growth, debt, and economic challenges. Welcome to Business 360.
Thanks for having me.
Let me just share with our audiences that we call you GSM Ben Diokno because you're former Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor, former Secretary of Finance, but also former Secretary of Budget twice, and Undersecretary even before that, and now Monetary Board member. You have one of the longest career legacies and most remarkable
40 years.
40 years as a public servant serving. So you're really the best person to tell us about our economy and going. If some of our audiences would recall, you were the architect, you were the first finance secretary of President Bongbong Marcos. And at the time, I remember we really hit the ground running because you had the 8-point socioeconomic agenda and the medium-term fiscal framework that you had crafted. And at the time, I remember that your vision for the economy was an economic transformation that would be achieved through high growth rates, meaning hitting 6 to 8% all the way up to 2028. And in the first year was a very good year while you were finance secretary. We hit 7.6%. But unfortunately, in 2025, perhaps because of global headwinds, Secretary R.C. Balisacan said that maybe it was also because of corruption. We hit only 4.4%. And in the first quarter of this year, it was 2.8%. Do you think, sir, that we are still on track? Can we still get back on track to the original vision of the Marcos administration?
I think you mentioned that the North Star really was that by 2028, we'll be growing at around 6.5 to 8%. We can't accomplish that anymore given the current trajectory. I think given the current trajectory, we'll probably hit something like maybe 5, 6%.
And is that enough?
As long as we can continue to grow at that rate for the next 20 years, that's more than enough. Next 20 years.
It should be good. In fact, I think as per the last Development Budget Coordination Committee meeting, they had projected for 2026, taking into consideration the Iran war, for this year it would be 3.5 to 4.5% target. And then for the following years, slowly they would try to go up to 5% that you mentioned. Is that attainable?
I think I will agree now with, earlier I was more optimistic than RC. I think that the current target of around between 3.5 to 4.5 rate, I think that will be achievable because of many developments. Number one, because I thought that the Iran-US war will be over, and now it has accelerated. And also because of recent developments, for example, the OFW remittances, while it has gone up by about 2.5%, the first trimester, 2.5%. To me, that is a sign of the altruistic nature of the remittances, meaning the Filipinos abroad are sending to their folks here because they think we need it here. But the worrisome part of that remittance is that about half of the deployment the deployment has declined by about half, 45%. That is worrisome.
Because of the war, sir? Or?
Yeah, because of the war and the slowdown of the global economy. So the 2.5% growth in OFW remittances, I doubt whether that is sustainable because the global economy slowed down. The income of our OFW remittances, of course, will also be affected by high prices all over. And of course, the deployment actually has declined by almost 50%, by half.
Oh my gosh.
So that's worrisome. So I also look at the foreign direct investments. For the first trimester, it has barely reached $2 billion. That suffers in comparison with our Asian neighbors. So my projection is that we'll probably hit around 6 billion FDIs, foreign direct investments. That's the kind of investment that we need. Those two will set up factories here and will stay here for the next 20 years. Okay.
$6 billion seems like such a small amount compared to what, for example, Singapore is in the hundreds of billions in FDIs.
So that's worrisome, the FDIs and the OFW remittances.
Do you think...
And the third one, which probably was not going to happen sooner than we expect, is the AI effect on the BPO industry in the country. So because the BPO industry and the OFW remittances account for easily around 70 billion US dollars every year. But that's also maybe down the road that will also be threatened by the AI.
I remember, sir, that during the pandemic, when you were BSP governor, one of the things that saved us was the remittances from our OFWs.
Correct.
And you had mentioned in your book, like how to the resilience of the economy. So factoring that in, and you said that it's worrisome. But now that we have this Iran war and we face all of these global headwinds moving forward, how can we overcome this now? Having experienced various crises throughout history, looking forward, what can we do?
Luckily, the Philippine economy is actually consumer-led, and so it's also not totally dependent on foreign investment or exports. So I think we should really strengthen the domestic economy. And I think the key there is restoring the loss of confidence in the government. Because of that flood control mess, I think the confidence has actually declined. And so that goes with foreign direct investment and consumption. Even consumption has slowed down to around 3%. That is kind of dismal. The usual number would be about 5-6%. And so that's terrible. Because consumption accounts for about, I think, easily around 2/3 or even 75% of our economy. So we can still grow because we have a very young population, and so we have to strengthen our domestic economy.
You mentioned corruption and the flood control scandal, and that's really one of the things that people are looking to see today be answered at the State of the Nation address. Because last year, sinabi po ni President BBM, mahiya naman kayo. And so people are looking for answers. In the fourth quarter of last year, Secretary R.C. Balisacan even said that corruption, in fact, factored into the decrease in our GDP. Is there a measure for this cost of corruption? You had mentioned that confidence, but how do we measure it in terms of how it brings down the economy?
As you mentioned, Q1, first quarter grew by only 2.8%. That's part of this, okay? Loss of confidence. And I think the Q2 numbers, the second quarter numbers, would be equally bad. And so I would think that the public construction has actually shrunk sharply. And that's number one. And then I think that will be restored, if at all, by the first quarter of next year.
Not even in the third quarter. The economic managers have said that they feel that by the third and fourth quarter this year, things will start picking up. But your prediction, sir, is that no, it will pick up in 2027 yet?
That's the hope, that it will somehow pick up in the second half of the year. But given the bureaucracy and given the loss of confidence, I think it will pick up in the first quarter of next year. Unless there's something, the President will say something this today on his State of the Nation address that will restore confidence immediately. Okay.
One of the things that people are looking to see today is an announcement of catching one of the big fish. But no matter how many fish they are able to catch, is that something that would restore confidence, or are investors looking to see something else, in fact, perhaps, for example, really tracking and monitoring our infrastructure projects? Or is it really enough that in the State of the Nation address, the President is able to show that the Ombudsman has in fact been doing a good job in catching these quote-unquote big fish?
I'm willing to ignore what's going to happen with the bad guys, right? I assume something will happen to them. I'd like the President to be forward-looking and talk of the budget, next year's budget. I think that's important. He will say, if I were the President, I'll say, this is my budget, don't mess up with this budget. I want this to be a clean and transparent budget. What does that mean? That means Congress may not increase his budget as presented. That's in the Constitution. But in the last 3 years, Congress has always increased the budget. And that's the source of this corruption, okay? And then I will exercise my line item veto power. That's an awesome power of the President. Not even the U.S. President has that power, okay? Line item veto power. And so I will start with my cabinet members. which I always do during when I was budget secretary of Cory, Erap, Duterte, and even when I was finance secretary, I always tell, before the budget is finalized, I always tell the president during the cabinet meeting, Mr. President, this is your budget. If any of your secretaries cannot live with their budget as you present them, fire them. And then that's also a warning to them. If you negotiate with Congress for a higher budget than what I am presenting, I will fire you. I think that's a strong statement. And I think that will restore the credibility of the president right away. Okay?
In the past years, the different priorities were set and stated at the State of the Nation address. I remember when you were Finance Secretary, the initial years of the Marcos administration, the priority was high growth through infrastructure spending. And that's why he had the Build Better More program.
Correct.
And then mid-year, this shifted to social infrastructure, meaning education. And he really highlighted the importance of nurturing the next generations for a sustainable economy. This time, it seems that the focus has been local governments and devolution. Do you think that this is the correct direction for the economy, or should there be a different priority? Should we have stuck to the infrastructure and use that to continue on for the entire 6 years, or there's been quite a different curve now in that path? What is the direction setting you think that should be
I have mixed feelings
pursued?
about this shift in focus. Of course, the national government should continue with their Build Better More program. I think they should set aside at least 5 to 6%. I understand that the 2027 budget, it's only 4%, right, of GDP. That's what I got. I have mixed feelings because, number one, it's a good idea because local governments have a lot of money and they don't know how to spend their money. Of course, the LGUs are a heterogeneous group. There's some good guys, some bad guys, right? So I look at the numbers and there's a surplus in the aggregate, around 2% of GDP, surplus for LGUs. In other words, they're not spending their money. Secondly, I think the LGUs, again, they are very heterogeneous, but most local governments are not good partners of government. In fact, they're barriers to development, number one, because it's so difficult to get mayor's permit or whatever permits you need for construction. For example, if you want to build a coal power plant, it will take you maybe 3 years to clear up all with the barangays and the mayor's permit. Red tape, right? And so I think that's a good idea, but they have the LGUs have to shape up. Right?
You're correct, sir, because the national tax allotment now is at 18%.
Yes,
and
yes,
they're earning, the local government units have so much budget, but they are not able to utilize it well.
40% of all our taxes go to LGUs, local government units.
And then, sir, on top of that, the economic managers, or at least the executive secretary, has also been hyping up the local government support fund. So there's a local government support fund on top of the national tax allotment. But like, for example, some of our mayors have been praising them for this. Do you think that it's redundant?
Yeah, I think 40% of of all our taxes going to them is more than enough. It used to be around only 25%.
And then
we created this fund to provide incentives for them to behave this way. But you know, most of them are more focused on getting more money out of this fund rather than spending their own money.
Do you think the LGSF is kind of being used as a kind of pork barrel?
Exactly, yeah. And most of them don't. For example, some LGUs are supposed to spend 20% of their budget for capital projects. But most of them don't do that because they're waiting for the congressman or the senators to help them instead of spending their own money.
Sir, as a final question, the big question or the big feeling of our people is that in spite of the gains of the economy, there's still no food on the table. Hindi nila nararamdaman yung mga ginagawa daw po ng administrasyon. What can the government do to make the people feel that, in fact, our administration is working for them or the economy is working for them?
I think the focus of the government is to create jobs, better paying jobs, rather than the ayudas, okay? I think Filipinos, in general, they prefer to work rather than beg, right? Because there's pride in working. So I think that should be the focus. More manufacturing jobs, we should strengthen the small and medium-scale industries, things like that. So better paying jobs and focus on growth rather than on the next election. Okay?
As our final question, what is the state of the economy today?
State of the economy is very uncertain. It could go this way or that way. Okay? But as I said, lower growth than what we projected earlier during the first year of this administration. We were projecting something like 6.5 to 8% for the last 3 years. Now we're looking at maybe 4% this year and maybe around 5% next year, if at all.
But we continue to hope, and hopefully our economic managers will do well in bringing us back on track.
I think they should really focus on this year's budget, 2027 budget, because that is the election budget for 2028. And I think the congressmen and the senators have other ideas than what the president has.
Okay, so amidst all of this uncertainty, we continue to hope. Thank you so much, GSM Ben Diokno. It's been an honor to have you with us today as we talk about the state of the nation. And that's Business 360. I'm Margaux Salcedo. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.